Thank you. So now that we've got that set up, introducing myself. I started a blog in 2006, which in 2006 was not a big deal at all because that's what everybody was doing in 2006. Yeah, Blogspot, it was free. I didn't know how to code. It was awesome. And all of a sudden I had this site, and then Metafilter found it. And then I had a literary agent, and then I had all these clients, and I was drawing cards for the BBC, and I still hadn't told anyone in real life that I knew how the internet worked and that I had a blog. So it's weird because I just started doing this thing, and all of a sudden, almost 10 years later, I've drawn about 5,000, seriously, 5,000, I have shoeboxes of these, index card things for a living, which is bizarre. And it's a creative habit that's helped me organize thoughts. I keep on the maker wagon. I keep making stuff. It keeps me online with my internet friends who are real people and who are wonderful. And if you don't have any internet friends that you've never met before but you still love, you need to go make some because they're out there and they're waiting for you. The internet is a magical place. So when you do have a creative habit like this, in a week you'll have a pile of ideas, and in a month you'll have kind of half a portfolio, and in a year you'll be literally an expert and you'll give talks on drawing index cards. You just have to kind of keep up what you're working on. So since 2006 too, blogs have faded, Tumblr popped up, Twitter got huge, Facebook took over, hot second that Upworthy type weird linky shit was everywhere. And then Vine was doing stuff, and now YouTube, and now you have to be like 12 to be awesome online, and everything's really shifting and weird. And so this is from when Medium launched, and they actually paid me to write for them. Now they don't because business models shift. So another lesson I've learned is that content takes lots of different forms, and it's never about the platform. It's always about the content itself. And so I had to learn animation, how to pitch art galleries, how to do shows for like headline news, and like how to sell stuff in Amsterdam and transfer money back and forth. That felt really illegal and kind of fun. And the internet and all media just is not going to hold still. But if you have a voice, you can put your voice onto all sorts of different formats. These are slides from an Ignite Seattle talk I did a couple months ago. And nobody tells you that when you start drawing weird things on the internet, eventually people will want to put you on planes and take you places and make you talk about it in front of other people. That's not a skill that comes with drawing stuff. And so in 2007 was the first time people were like, we want to put you on a plane and make you talk to people. And at the time I was an ACD at an agency in Ohio, and I was considered not senior enough to go to these conferences. So then I went and I talked to my bosses, and that was awesome. And I didn't tell them, I just told them I was taking vacation. So if you think you can't handle it, or you're too junior, or you're too anything, you're not, and the internet will give you a chance to basically prove that you can do whatever you want. Like, get on a plane and talk to people. Sometimes you get to fly first class, which is super rad. This is a piece I did for a winery. The capitalism machine will find you, no matter how pure your creative stuff is the first time, and they'll throw money at you. And in 2008, when the economy started to fall into the gutter, I was collecting checks from companies, and it was weird. But the most important thing I realized is you have to be top of mind. People didn't pay me because I'm the smartest tool in the shed. I mean, come on, I do this. They found me because they knew my work, and it was easy to throw money at me because they knew where I was. So it's more important to be top of mind than to be really good, which is kind of sad, but also true. So just market yourself. Make yourself easy to find. I felt like I had to put this up because somebody already asked about gluten twice this morning. And this is just one of those things that, again, I got paid by Medium to draw this. And life is funny on the internet. Have I lingered long enough, or is it still? a processy thing. I like listening to people see my stuff because sometimes it takes like that 10 seconds of like, huh? And they're like, oh. And I have another one of those, so I will flick on over that one. I call these things spider charts, and I call them that because I don't know what else to call them. Otherwise, if I have 5 points, it's a demonic pentagram. And every time I put one of those up, people are like, are you a Satanist? And I'm like, yes. So just a scale of time on the internet. When I started drawing these, in 2006, 100,000 views would bring in like $1,500 in ad revenue, which was like, sweet. I like Google AdWords. This shit is rad. Sorry. And but now, like, 2 million views brings almost the same in through another mid ad buying something. So content creation is an ad agency. I saw this phrase and I had to share it with you. An industry in search of a business model. And so most creators online are finding that, okay, you have licensing, you have bespoke commissions, you have product lines, you have publishing, you have this, you have all sorts of like little tendrils of your stuff that has to go into everything to sort of make you a viable property. So another thing I learned is be a Satanist and diversify your skills and offerings and build your own business model. No two internet people I know have the exact same sort of revenue stream building stuff. And this is a piece from, I think, like 2011-ish, economy-wise. That was the year I spent abroad in London. I was 5 to 8 time zones away from all my people and my online communities and my clients, and it was totally isolated. And I learned how to wander around, like 8 to 12 miles a day, wander around, like rub through running shoes, wander around. And I'd never really done that before, like that much time. And it really helped my work. And it helped me think longer and different. And when I physically moved, I could think a lot more with my brain. So I downloaded an app just to see how much I was wandering around when I moved back to Seattle. And the first day it said I walked 17.9 miles. And at the end of the day, I had 2 months worth of graphs in my little notebook. So good day all around. And so basically I learned that if you can get your physical body moving, your brain will work too. And I couldn't really not talk about Facebook on this talk because of content shock and how algorithm tweaks and where stuff goes and how people find it has really changed a lot. So when everything has to be shareable, every piece of content has to be something you can bring home to your mom, like literally, because she's on Facebook. And a lot of the like gritty, beautiful edges of the internet sort of like got sort of buffed out by that. And the weirder stuff moved to like creepier places like Reddit. You laugh, but it's true. And so the lesson here is like every business is online and off. And online is just one home for your stuff to live. So you don't have to polish off all the like gritty, angry edges when you have a gritty, angry place not on the internet that nobody can forward it to your mom. And this I wanted to share just because the quote itself really sums up what it feels like to work online and how to realize like, this is weird and this is fun and I get to do this. And I can take like this bizarre, crazy thing, like what does he call it? Consumer, it's very small on my screen. Consumer horribleness and make it into something beautiful. So with that, I'm just going to move on to sort of a timeline summation of what I've been doing. Books. I'm just going to go through my books. They're portfolios of your work that people buy, which as an advertising person, I'm like, sweet. Like people buy my portfolio? Awesome. My work between covers, that's a thing. People do this. This is a book called Information Graphics. It was the first textbook my work was featured in about 2008. This book weighs 30 pounds. It's beautiful. It's by Taschen. And when it arrived in the mail, I felt like I had made it. Like nothing else to this day made me feel like I made it. I'm in this book. Like I'm here. And all the other stuff really didn't feel as big as that. And so even when you think you're like, this is what success is, and I have like this much money or this much stuff, something will hit you and you'll be like, no, it's when you have a 2-page spread in a textbook. So You can try to define it, but the world will tell you how you feel. So 2007, this is my first book deal, when the blog to book phenomenon was like a thing that people did. I love 2007. Let's bring that back. But so launched the blog in 2006. My agent had me in September. November, I got an email from an editor at Penguin. I got to be like the most badass emailer ever, like forward to agent. Like that was the coolest forward I ever sent. And then it took 2 years for this book to come out, just when the economy was like going down the shitter. So the main lesson of this book was honestly that publishing takes forever, and that's okay. So the next book thing, remember the economy is like circling the drain, and these are postcards you can send to other people. And this deal was with Chronicle Books. They originally signed me up to do a product line for like all sorts of stuff. But yeah, 2008, by the time like Lehman Brothers was like taking the whole economy like globally down with it, they're like, okay, we're just going to do this one little book of postcards. And so I was like, oh, doom, like, oh, this is terrible. And then like 2 days later, this guy at Salesforce called and was like, can we pay you a big retainer to use your stuff in our ad campaign? And I'm like, I love you, universe. And so, yes, like, send me your stuff, save me. And the lesson here is that the world is huge and complicated, and one thing doesn't work out, something else will come in. And never get too hung up on any little detail of stuff, because you still get to make jokes about chicken. This is a set of books that happened in 2009. When one of your design heroes wants you to write about how you work, you say yes. And when two of your design heroes want you to be in their books, you definitely say yes. And when Seth Godin throws money at you to illustrate his book, you say yes. So working on those 3 books and doing all these commission pieces, like, I was maybe realizing, like, maybe this wasn't a fluke. Maybe I actually had, like, things to say. And it took me a long time to get something close to, like, pride in my work. Because I'm from Ohio. We don't do that. I was conditioned not to brag, not to make anybody feel bad, to be seen and not heard, like the little sad child, like the whole time. So just for scale, I told my mom about the first book deal, and she cut me off and she goes, well, your sister's a notary public. Like with a stamp. And then I told my ex, who, this is why he's my ex, about 10 minutes about it, like after I called my mom, like got over it, and he goes, well, what do you want me to do about it? And I was like, I guess I'm not going to tell anybody else. So then I just did all my PR and stuff without people in the real world. But these 3 books in 2009, like somehow these people trusted me with their stuff. And I started to be like kind of fucking proud. So this is where I went into geek world. Like, I didn't know that visualization and data manipulation was a thing until people told me I was doing it. So I went to a conference in San Jose about visualization, and I met Noah, who is my really good friend and who got ordained online to marry me and my not ex. And he's over at Amazon actually doing visualization stuff now. And he's like, these are the O'Reilly people. They're very geeky. They do weird conferences. Get in this book. And another thing I learned from all this is there is a market for literally everything. And there are pockets of like awesomely cool, interesting people doing stuff that you might not even know is a thing. And you might be doing it. And you already have a tribe out there. You don't even know you're doing what they're doing. That's why the internet, you just Google how you describe yourself 1,000 ways and you'll find 1,000 people. So being part of this book was one of those like random things that I was like, how do I have ideas? Like everybody asks that in like every interview, where do you come up with your ideas? And I was like, I don't know. I'm really nosy. And I listen to people and I jot things down. And sometimes I wander around and usually I just play with a dictionary. And so I had to write this all down and think about it. So I started playing with text and playing with paint. And then I read this book and other people had different ideas. Like maybe they knit, maybe they sew, maybe they do all sorts of stuff. And so I started playing with all of their little ideas and watching weird short films and like really dark things and jotting all this down. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was doing all this bizarro not work, but like creative play. And I was building foundations for future work. So that tinkering, like seemingly pointless, exploratory creative stuff, that is super important work. And you need that for the things you don't know are coming later. And speaking of foundational things, this is one of my internet friends, Jason. I've met him once in the 7 years I've known him. And he has a Tumblr all about charts, so clearly we're going to be good friends. Yeah, put whatever you want in your book. Let's do that. And then we've kept in touch. We've always been like, I get you. I like this. So now we have a book coming out in the spring from Running Press called The Hustle Economy, which is 25 essays from a lot of our creative friends about how they work. And yeah, the lesson here is that internet people are real and you should be friends with them. And you can make awesome stuff. Including me, I want to be all of your friends and we're going to make stuff. So this is a weird book, very weird book. In 2011, I was living in London, wandering around all the time, basically being like the weird American that like stares at people and doesn't have British manners. And I wrote this article for Forbes.com about how to be interesting. And it had like millions of views and hundreds of thousands of shares. And my agent's like, this is a book. Hagy, write it. Proposal now. Send. I was like, okay. So now it's got 150,000 copies in print. Like, what the fuck? This thing is translated into Thai, Chinese, Dutch, Spanish, Korean, Russian, Arabic, French, and Bulgarian. That. Like this weird article I wrote on the internet like 4 years ago. So the lesson here is that throw your shit on the internet. Shit, I said it. Sorry. I'm really in a mood. Throw your ideas on the internet. You don't know what's going to stick. Something might really resonate with people and make them feel good. And I get emails all the time from people who've read that book saying like, you helped me survive depression, or you helped me get out of an abusive relationship. And like, I may have a silly job, but sometimes like the internet can do things. 2013 sucked. Like, straightforward. I had what is known in medical terms as a shitty pregnancy. I was barfing for about 7 months. I lost a lot of weight. I was on all sorts of drugs, like drugs that made me crazy. And I was in the hospital twice a week for IVs, so I didn't die. You don't make a lot of art that way. And I tried to keep it together for clients. I tried to keep it together for my online feeds. And the one thing I learned is that when I'm sick, I can't draw. When I can't draw, I feel sicker. And making art makes me a better person. So as soon as I had my little guy, he's 2 now, he's awesome, totally fine. Drugs did not mess him up. And I wasn't sick anymore. I started making so much art. And I felt so much better. And I thought at the time that that was a long year. But it's really just one slide. And speaking of all that art stuff, I got trapped at JFK a couple weeks after Hurricane Sandy came through, and a nor'easter was grounding flights. So I was stuck there for like 18 hours, and I wrote a book in 18 hours of poems, like, because that's what you do, right? And I'd never written poetry before, never really thought about it. These are unauthorized biographies of people. I was just people watching. So it's all there, just hanging out. And yeah, I just sent it off. And I was like, it's an experiment. What's going on? And lo and behold, Art House in Montreal, my editor, Rick, who is amazing and one of my favorite internet people, was like, yeah, let's publish this. This is a great book. And I was like, really? Like, I tricked you too. And he's like, you didn't trick me. This is really good. So this thing is right up there with the textbook. Like, this is a little silly book of poems that I did in one day. But it made me feel like kind of proud. Like, I'm from Ohio. I wrote a book of fucking poems. And this is the last one. This came out in the spring. So that rampage of me making stuff as soon as I wasn't pregnant anymore and could like make art, I was like going through the basement and I found this book, like The Art of War. And you're like, okay. And I started reading it. And I was like, this is actually really nice and really smart and really beautiful. And you know the New Yorker cartoon caption contest? So they give you an image, you write the caption. I I was like, this is a book of 300 captions that I can just put images on. I will do that. So right? Like, why not? So I did. I drew two chapters a week. And my kid was born end of July. By October, my agent was like pitching this project. This is going out. The book came out in March. And it's not drawn with a pen. It's like a whole art thing of like paint. Like I have India ink on everything. Like everything. Like I have towels that look like Rorschach tests. It's like a mess. And I'm really proud of this because this is like a beautiful, thoughtful, magical object. I'm like, I made this. Me. This thing. Yeah. And it's a tough book about like being thoughtful and diplomatic and a good leader. And my little guy needs to know that like that's what his mom fucking does. And so what you're doing, it matters. It all adds up. All the little bits of work, all the little things you send out, all the stuff you want to do, you can just make it. And you can be actually really proud. And that's what I learned from my work. I'm doing abstract paintings under a pseudonym. I'm going to be a dude for a while. Just to avoid, all the like, as a lady, how do you feel about this? Questions. I use Sharpie pens, and I work on 3x5 cards. When I have bigger, more complicated cards, I get bigger cards, and I feel like that's still kind of cheating. Sometimes, like straying from my original constraints, but I do that like once a month. Every morning I have to get up and walk like at least like 2 miles to get coffee. If I'm not like getting up and moving around, I just get kind of lethargic and weird. And I don't have any ideas. Like I have to sit and like, what am I going to do? But if I just go wandering around, I'm like, oh, I have to do this and that. I can do one of these. And like, I sound crazy, but it works. Oh, I'm sorry. It was, do you have a daily routine or do you try to avoid routine? That was, yes? All right, thank you. The question is, when you were younger, what did you think you were going to do when you were older? And for the longest time, I wanted to work at the North Pole and make toys. And then I got really into high school newspaper, and my dad had a journalism degree. So I went and got a journalism degree. And then I found advertising, and I was like, I'm going to take some typography classes and like crash the design classes and make a portfolio. So I did that. And I was a copywriter for like a decade. The question is, does it feel like you have a client? And honestly, I have like dozens of clients that are all a little different. And most of them come to me because they know what I do and they like what I do. And the only time I've had to fire a client, this is awful, it was a recruiting outfit. And they were talking about HR people and what HR people were looking for. And they were in Iowa. They're still in Iowa. And one of the points was, we don't want, like, when people have too many tattoos, we won't hire them. And I was like, okay, kind of sketchy, but I'm on the conference call, nodding along. And so later they're like, we want a graph that says, tattoos lower your amount of being hired. And at that time, I had just like been talking to my friend who's Jewish about tattoos and what that means. And I was like, I don't think I can do that. Like, that doesn't feel right. And I explained, like, it's kind of shitty. I didn't say it was shitty, but I was like, that's kind of offensive and rude. And like, I don't think it's really getting to the goal of you recruiting really good tech people. And so she got really mad. And then she started just calling and being angry and like demanding this one chart about tattoos. And so finally I just emailed her because I was afraid. And I was like, I think you need to find another cartoonist. And she continued to like call me for like a year. And I never replied, but that was intense. So I know. And I totally didn't even like fire. I just sort of ghosted. But the rest of my clients seem to just sort of be like, let's play with this, and it's fun. And I haven't had, when you're so specific about what you do that people only call you because of that, it's really hard to get off track because you're the only track you've got. Yeah. Creative blocks for me are, again, like that physical motion. Like the question was, how do you get over creative blocks? And I think sometimes I find not so much a block, but a repetition where I think the same things over and over again. And then I just have to sort of like chart that out and say, look, I've been here. What is not there? And just putting it that like juxtaposition of like, this is your black space, this is your white space. Go to the white space from the black space and be fine. Is sort of, I do just draw it out. Most unexpected mentors, I'd have to say that the internet is full of people from all crazy places. And one of the things I realized is that there are about 6 people in the United States named Jessica Hagy. And one of them is this really crazy college student who's just so much fun and so chill about everything. And I'm like, I want to be that Jessica Hagy. And I have another Jessica Hagy who's like this really polished, beautiful, like LA stylist. And she writes about like bride stuff. And I'm like, that's evil Jessica Hagy. So I kind of you kind of find yourself like, who am I today? Like, am I going toward good, like witty, fun stuff? Or am I like really messing with my hair? Like, the internet's fun. The question is, how has the internet changed for people putting their creative work online since I started? For now, I think it used to be a little more chaotic and happenstance, and serendipity was a lot more sort of fluttering in the air. And now, because it is so feed heavy, it's less spontaneous, you're less likely to find something bizarre or weird or something outside of typical stuff that you find. And I think trends are getting really, really tightly narrowed down. So before, like, 2006 was cool stuff on the internet is everything from like stuff that explodes, like dead whales, to like kittens, to like, this is how you make drugs in the basement, like Mentos and Coke, like everything weird. And now it's like inspirational quotes on a page. And that, it makes me kind of sad, but I know that it's temporary, and the internet is rebelling against that, and new stuff will find its way to you. Yeah, the question is having a very defined niche. How does that, is that confining or freeing or all that? Yeah. It's definitely easy for me to be known for what I do. It's also, clearly, I draw charts with a Sharpie, and people can steal it. And people have stolen literally every one of the like 5,000 things I've ever drawn. So getting used to that and figuring that out is one thing. By this point, it's easy for me to do, and I can just keep it up. And doing other stuff, I'm free to do that too. People just won't recognize it as me. Again, like, I should be a guy this year. So playing with identity and constraints and artistic style, I think is all sort of wound up for me in one thing. The question was, what kind of client is the most ideal as far as definition of ideas? Usually it's the clients that want to talk to me and have like enthusiasm for something. And it doesn't matter what it is. If they're like, we want to sell like I had Deloitte. Like, you think like, oh shit, like, oh, like this is going to be, oh. And they were so much fun. They were like, how can we say this? Like, what do you think? I don't know. How can we say this? Can you play with this? Like, if I hear, can you play with this? I'll be okay. As opposed to, I have these 3 keywords for SEO that we would like to put into our lyric. And so I think it's really that enthusiasm, because if people are like into their project, they'll be into finding like neat ways to say it. And when they're just like checking it off the list, they don't care. How has being a parent affected my creative process? Honestly, I always sort of thought like the internet is forever, right? So this kid can find all of this stuff about me. And I wanted to just be honest and not sort of fake it and not say, yes, I'm respectable and I have a job. And he has his dad for that. Like, I am sort of, I do this and it's what I do and it's fun. And hopefully when you grow up, you have fun with life too. But creatively, I try and say shit less. I have a pen that I always carry around and paperwork, and sometimes I write on my hand, and sometimes I just write on whatever I have lying around. But most of the time, I have a running list of things I have to do. So then I get home, let the dog out, sit down, write out my list, and then work from my list. Who wants cake?